So understanding the four functions of mind individually is really a precursor to how to coordinate all of the different functions and make them work together well. You see, over time, things are either done by default or by design. And so if you are unaware of the four functions of mind, as I was for a long time in my life, they still operate, they still happen, and your mind creates all of these different connections and overlaps. Now, that happens by default. And the idea of understanding these four functions is to effectively reach in and untangle all of these different connections that happen by default so that we can reconnect them by our design, the way we want to be designed. So for instance, if I can quickly cut through each of the different functions of mind, chitta, for instance, is a good one to start with, because there are some significant problems that happen with chitta. Chitta is a wonderfully powerful function of your mind. It's a deep reservoir of all this information that you've been collecting and storing throughout life. It's your unconscious mind. It's responsible for a great many things. But chitta is very much limited by your perception at the time that you store your memory. So, in your perception in any moment is influenced by a great many things. It could be your emotion, your incentive at the time, what you wanted to get out of a situation, maybe how old you are and how well you could process what was happening, or even where you were just physically standing. All of these things contribute to a truly limited perception. We are not objective in any way. We are limited in how we see things. And that's what we store, is our limited perception. Now, to make matters worse, your memories are then complicated even further, because as we store the memories, over time, they change ever so slightly. Because we don't store memories in a very black and white kind of method. We store it in a way that was based on how it affected us and how it influenced us over time, or how important it was. Nothing is objective in that way. We have this value chain within us, and that's how we store information in chitta. Now, when you combine ahamkara, or your identity, with chitta, your memories, it becomes more convoluted, especially when it's just happening by default. Now, you build your identity on all of the things that happen to you and all these different preferences that you have. So if chitta is storing information based on limited perception, and that has changed over time because it's really just influenced by that time function, then we are building our identity based on a limited truth or a false truth. Now, this is where a lot of different old stories come into place, and we've talked about that in part 2 during the guided meditation portion. And old stories that we have, and that identity piece, and what can we shed from our old story, that's where this becomes so important. In addition, it comes in with limiting beliefs, which I think is another topic that Crystal touched on during the guided meditations portion as well. All of these pieces are really attributed to this connection between ahamkara and chitta, as well as, if you look at this at more of a macro level, it's your worldview, how you see the world and what it needs from you, or maybe how you could insert yourself into it in some way. So the connection between chitta and ahamkara is a vitally important one to understand, especially when you try to understand what was done by default versus what you have intentionally connected. If we move on to manas, I like talking about manas in that it is, this direct control over your senses and how you interpret the world. So manas in general relies on somebody else to make the decisions. All it does is it brings in information and compares it and contrasts it and just kind of like sends it up to the boss. So in an ideal world, manas is going to be directly connected with buddhi. And that's what we want to be able to establish. But that doesn't happen by default. In fact, it usually doesn't. What typically happens is manas begins to rely on chitta and ahamkara and the connection of the two. And so, and that's a really fancy way to say that your senses and how you interpret the world is largely limited to or based on old information and on your preferences. Or what a really technical way to say that is the old information. If you're relying on old information in a present moment, that's something called transference in psychology. And if you're taking your senses and relying on your preferences, that's called a prejudice. And so these things, these links, that's what we have to be very careful of as we explore mindful living. Now, I wanted to get back to buddhi because, as I said before, manas in an ideal world has a direct connection to buddhi. So your decisive faculty gives the direction directly to manas, which kind of supervises all of your senses and helps you operate in the world. The best way to make that connection stronger is to strengthen buddhi's voice and to provide more clarity around it. I kind of laugh when you think about other ways to do that would be to forcibly shut down chitta and quiet that voice. And, as we said multiple times in this program, that you cannot quiet your mind. It is doing its job. So instead of trying to forcibly quiet this or shut down or eliminate or kill the ego, we can't do those things. We need to be able to strengthen certain connections. So the best ways to do this are to create a reward system for yourself. Now, when you notice that you have had this chance to listen to this discriminative knowledge within you, and the example that I think everybody can connect with is that suddenly you found yourself in a situation where something fell apart and you're like, oh, I should have listened to my I knew it all along, or whatever it was. That moment you have to acknowledge that it was as what it was, is that you had this chance to listen to your discriminative faculty. You had this chance to connect to that higher wisdom. And it's not bad that you didn't, although it might be, unfortunate at the time. It's recognizing those moments and then kind of getting back into that feeling and rewarding yourself for acknowledging that you had that chance, or better yet, that you actually did listen to buddhi in those moments. So that's a really important way to strengthen the voice of buddhi, because the more you can train your mind to speak louder and clearer when it comes to those moments, the better. And finally, another way that you can also reward yourself is to be comfortable with uncomfortable situations. If we go back to the connection between chitta and ahamkara, chitta is this source of memory, and ahamkara, its bedrock is based on preference. And so if you remember all of these preferences and you're connecting all of these things constantly, it's very natural for all of us to seek this life of comfort, where that isn't necessarily the best way to do things. It might be a comfortable way to do things, and that's fine for here and there. But buddhi is this discriminative faculty. It's this decisive faculty in us that isn't trying to find what's comfortable or what's good. Buddhi is trying to help you find what's best. And so that is the essence of how to strengthen buddhi, is to find all of these ways to reward yourself for hearing the voice, and also getting outside of your comfort zone to work in this new space where you're going to learn so much more about who you are and are not. Studying the inner states, or the four functions of your mind, is really a method to connect to your consciousness. And I know I said that in the introduction video for this, So I really wanted to highlight it here, is that understanding or connecting with your consciousness is all about exercising full mental control. It's understanding how to direct your thoughts and your emotions in any given moment.